My best friend trashed my boyfriend for months until I caught them kissing, so I taught them a lesson they would never forget for the rest of their lives. My name is Riley, and I need to tell you this story because maybe it will save another woman from making the same mistakes I did. I had been with Marcus for 8 months when I decided that my best friend Zoe absolutely had to love him as much as I did. It seemed so simple in my mind. If they just spent more time together, she would see what an amazing person he was and stop making those little comments about how he wasn't good enough for me. So, I started inviting her over constantly. Every Friday night became dinner at my apartment with the 3 of us. I would spend hours planning the perfect meals, setting the table with candles, and choosing music that would create just the right atmosphere. I genuinely believed I was building something beautiful, bringing together the 2 most important people in my life. Come on, Zoe, I would say, practically begging her to join us. Just give him a chance. You'll see how funny he is once you really get to know him. She would always agree with this reluctant sigh, like she was doing me a huge favor. Fine, but don't expect me to pretend I think he's perfect, she'd say, rolling her eyes. During these dinners, I would watch them like a hopeful matchmaker, jumping in whenever the conversation got tense, laughing a little too loudly at Marcus's jokes, desperately trying to show Zoe how wonderful he was. When they would sit in awkward silence, I convinced myself it was progress. At least they weren't arguing, right? I remember one particular evening when I had made Marcus's favorite pasta dish and spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment until it sparkled. Zoe arrived late, as usual, complaining about traffic while barely acknowledging Marcus. Throughout dinner, I kept steering the conversation toward topics I knew they both enjoyed. Books, movies, travel dreams. Marcus just read this amazing thriller, I said brightly. The same author you love, Zoe. Tell her about it, babe. But instead of the connection I hoped for, Zoe just nodded politely and changed the subject. I didn't give up, though. After dinner, when I went to the kitchen to get dessert, I lingered a few extra minutes, hoping they would bond in my absence. When I returned, they were sitting quietly on opposite ends of the couch, both looking at their phones. Everything okay? I asked, setting down the chocolate cake I had spent 2 hours making. Perfect, Zoe said with that smile I thought meant she was finally warming up to him. What I didn't know then was that those moments when I left them alone, to answer the door, use the bathroom, or take a phone call, were when everything was really happening. While I was orchestrating what I thought was the beginning of a beautiful friendship, I was actually creating the perfect opportunity for my own destruction. Looking back now, I can see how incredibly stupid I was. But at the time, I was just a girl in love who wanted her best friend to be happy for her. I had no idea that I was inviting a predator into my relationship, giving her unlimited access to study my boyfriend, learn his habits, and plan her attack. The irony is that I was so focused on making them like each other that I completely missed the fact that they were already developing their own relationship behind my back. The worst part about Zoe's performance was how convincing it was. Every time we had our group dinners, she would pick fights with Marcus about the most ridiculous things. She'd criticize his job, question his opinions, and challenge everything he said with this aggressive energy that made me cringe. I just don't understand how someone can work in marketing, she'd say, her voice dripping with disdain. It's basically lying to people for money, isn't it? Marcus would get defensive, which I totally understood, and I'd jump in like a referee trying to keep the peace. Zoe, that's not fair. Marcus helps small businesses reach their customers. He's actually helping people. These dinner arguments became so intense that I started getting anxiety attacks before our Friday nights. I'd call Marcus beforehand, practically begging him to be patient with her. She's not usually like this, I'd explain, pacing around my apartment. I think she's just protective of me. Once she realizes how good you are to me, she'll come around. Marcus would sigh on the other end of the line. Riley, maybe we should stop doing these dinners. She clearly doesn't like me. No, I'd protest. That's exactly why we need to keep trying. She's my best friend, Marcus. I need her to approve of us. After each disastrous evening, Zoe would call me within hours, launching into detailed critiques of Marcus that left me feeling confused and defensive. Did you see how he talked to the waitress at lunch last week? She'd say. Red flag, Riley. And the way he interrupts, you when you're telling stories, a good boyfriend would never do that. I'd find myself making excuses for him, explaining away every behavior she pointed out, but her words would stick in my head like tiny seeds of doubt. She was so specific, so passionate in her concerns, that part of me wondered if she was seeing something I was missing. You deserve someone who worships the ground you walk on, she'd tell me. Someone who treats you like the queen you are. Marcus is just ordinary. What I didn't know was that during our dinner parties, when I'd excuse myself to refill drinks or check on the food in the kitchen, the entire dynamic between them would shift. The hostility would melt away, replaced by something completely different. They'd lean closer together, their voices would drop to whispers, and suddenly they weren't enemies anymore. I discovered this months later when my neighbor mentioned seeing them talking intimately on my balcony during one of our dinners while I was inside washing dishes. At the time when she told me, I actually felt happy about it. See, they were probably bonding, I had said excitedly. I knew if they just spent more time together, they'd realize they have things in common. Looking back, I want to shake that naive version of myself. The signs were everywhere. But I was so determined to create harmony that I ignored every red flag. When Zoe started asking specific questions about Marcus's schedule, I thought she was trying to be a better friend by taking an interest in my relationship. When does he usually go to the gym? She'd ask casually. What time does he get home from work? Does he ever go to that coffee shop on 5th Street? I'd answer everything eagerly, thinking I was helping her understand his routine so she could see what a stable, reliable guy he was. I even gave her details about his favorite restaurants, his weekend habits, and the places he liked to hang out with his friends. I was basically giving her a roadmap to my boyfriend's life, and I was too blind to see it. The signs started becoming impossible to ignore about 2 months into our regular dinner routine. But I was so invested in my fantasy of perfect harmony that I explained away every single one. Zoe began mentioning things about Marcus that she shouldn't have known. During one of her usual criticism sessions, she said, "And did you notice he has that tiny scar above his left eyebrow? It makes him look kind of rough, like he's been in fights." I paused, confused. "How do you even know about that scar? You'd have to be sitting pretty close to him to notice something that small." "I'm observant," she said quickly. "I notice everything about people I don't trust." Another time, she mentioned that Marcus probably spent too much money on expensive coffee. "I bet he's one of those guys who goes to that fancy place downtown and orders complicated drinks," she said with disgust. The thing is, Marcus did have a complicated coffee order, and he did go to an expensive place downtown, but I had never mentioned that to anyone. It was one of those little details you only know about someone when you spend real time with them. When I pointed this out, Zoe laughed it off. "Riley, it's obvious just by looking at him. He has that whole pretentious, coffee snob vibe." But the weirdest part was how Marcus started defending her. After months of tension, he suddenly began making excuses for her behavior. "Maybe Zoe has a point about some things," he said one night after a particularly brutal dinner where she had criticized everything from his shirt to his opinions about movies. "She's looking out for you. I can respect that. I was shocked. Are you serious? She was horrible to you tonight." "She's passionate," he said with a shrug. "I kind of admire how much she cares about your happiness." This was the same man who used to complain about her attitude, who would text me frustrated messages after our group dinners. Now he was defending her. I should have realized something was very wrong, but instead, I felt relieved. Finally, they were starting to understand each other. The most obvious sign came during a dinner at my apartment when I stepped outside to take an important work call. The conversation was urgent and lasted about 15 minutes. When I came back inside, both Zoe and Marcus seemed flustered. Zoe's hair looked slightly messed up, and Marcus was adjusting his shirt. "Everything okay?" I asked, noticing the weird energy in the room. "Fine," they said almost simultaneously, not making eye contact with me or each other. "We were just talking about that new restaurant downtown," Zoe added quickly. Marcus was telling me about their menu. But neither of them had ever shown interest in discussing restaurants together before. They usually couldn't agree on anything, let alone have a calm conversation about food. I started paying closer attention after that, and I noticed more strange moments. How they would stop talking abruptly when I entered a room. How Zoe would know details about Marcus's work projects that I hadn't shared with her. How Marcus would bring up topics that only Zoe and I had discussed privately. The final piece of evidence came when I found a receipt in Marcus's jacket pocket for a restaurant we had never been to together. When I asked him about it, he said he had gone there for a work lunch. But later that same day, Zoe mentioned that she had tried that exact restaurant recently and hated it. Two people who supposedly couldn't stand each other had somehow both ended up at the same obscure restaurant within days of each other. The coincidence felt impossible. By spring, I was feeling like our relationship needed a fresh start. The constant tension between Marcus and Zoe during our dinners was exhausting me, and I thought maybe a change of scenery would help everyone relax and finally connect properly. "What do you think about taking a trip?" I asked Marcus one Sunday morning while we were having coffee in bed. "Somewhere we can just unwind and enjoy each other's company without all the distractions of home." His eyes lit up immediately. "That sounds perfect. Where were you thinking?" I had been researching beach destinations for weeks, dreaming of romantic walks on the sand and quiet dinners watching sunsets. "Maybe that coastal town you mentioned wanting to visit, the one with the lighthouse and the seafood restaurants." "Oceanside Bay," I said. He looked surprised. "How did you remember that? I think I only mentioned it once." Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Zoe. When I told her about our trip plans, her response caught me completely off guard. "Oh my god, that sounds amazing. I actually really need a vacation right now. Work has been absolutely killing me," she said, and I could hear genuine excitement in her voice for the first time in months. I hesitated. The whole point was to get some alone time with Marcus, away from the constant drama of our group dynamics. But then I thought about how stressed she had seemed lately, and how maybe this could be the breakthrough moment I'd been hoping for. "Would you want to come with us?" I heard myself asking, immediately regretting it but unable to take it back. "Really? You wouldn't mind? I know it's your romantic getaway." "No, it could be fun," I lied, already imagining the arguments and tension that would follow us to the beach. Maybe we could rent one of those big beach houses with separate bedrooms. When I told Marcus about Zoe joining us, I expected him to be disappointed or frustrated. Instead, he just nodded and said, "Sure, if that's what you want. It might actually be nice to have someone else to hang out with." That response should have sent alarm bells ringing in my head, but I was too focused on my fantasy of finally achieving peace between them. Zoe threw herself into the trip planning with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from her in years. She researched restaurants, found the perfect beach house rental, and even suggested activities that she claimed Marcus would enjoy. "There's this great hiking trail that leads to a hidden cove," she told me, showing me photos on her phone. "Marcus mentioned loving photography, right? This would be perfect for him." I don't remember ever telling her that Marcus was into photography, but I pushed the thought aside. Maybe he had mentioned it during one of our dinners. She also seemed to know exactly which restaurants he would prefer, which beaches had the best surfing conditions, and even which local brewery served the kind of craft beer he liked. Her knowledge was suspiciously detailed for someone who supposedly couldn't stand him. How do you know all this stuff about what Marcus likes? I asked her while we were booking activities online. I pay attention, she said with a shrug. Know your enemy, right? But she didn't say it with her usual bitter tone. There was something playful, almost affectionate in her voice that I had never heard before when she talked about him. The week before we left, I noticed both of them acting strangely excited about the trip. Marcus started working out more frequently, saying he wanted to look good in his swim trunks. Zoe went shopping for new bikinis and spent more money on vacation clothes than I had ever seen her spend on anything. I want to look amazing on this trip, she told me while trying on a particularly revealing swimsuit. Sometimes a girl just needs to feel sexy, you know? I should have wondered why she cared about looking sexy on a trip where the only people who would see her were me and a boyfriend she claimed to hate. But instead, I was just happy that everyone seemed genuinely excited about our vacation together. The beach house was perfect. Exactly what I had dreamed of for a romantic getaway. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound deck overlooking the ocean, and a kitchen that opened onto a living area with floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first 2 days, everything seemed to be going exactly as I had hoped. Marcus and Zoe weren't fighting. In fact, they were getting along better than they ever had at home. They laughed at each other's jokes, agreed on restaurant choices, and even collaborated on making breakfast without a single argument. I felt vindicated. This trip was exactly what we all needed. On our 3rd day, I decided to surprise Marcus with a gift from one of the local art galleries we had passed. He had admired a photograph of the lighthouse, and I wanted to buy it for him as a memento of our first vacation together. I'm going to run into town for a little while, I announced after lunch. There's something I want to pick up. Want company? Zoe offered, but she was lying on the deck in her new bikini, looking perfectly content to stay exactly where she was. No, enjoy the sun. I'll be back in an hour or so. Marcus was reading in the living room and barely looked up when I kissed him goodbye. Take your time, he said. I might take a nap. The drive into town was beautiful, winding along the coastline with the ocean sparkling in the afternoon sun. I felt happier and more relaxed than I had in months. Finally, the 3 most important people in my life were getting along. I spent longer in town than planned, browsing through several galleries before finding the perfect piece. The lighthouse photograph was even more beautiful than I remembered, and the gallery owner told me stories about the local history that I couldn't wait to share with Marcus. When I got back to the house, I was practically bouncing with excitement. The surprise was going to be perfect. I parked quietly and decided to sneak in through the back door to surprise him. That's when I heard them. The sounds were coming from the deck, soft moaning, whispered words I couldn't quite make out. And then Zoe's voice, saying Marcus's name in a way that made my blood run cold. I crept closer to the sliding glass door, staying hidden behind the outdoor shower wall, and looked out onto the deck where we had been having breakfast just hours earlier. Marcus was lying on the lounge chair where Zoe had been sunbathing when I left. She was straddling him, her bikini top discarded on the deck beside them, and they were kissing with a passion and familiarity that told me this was definitely not their first time. But what destroyed me wasn't just seeing them together. It was watching how they moved with each other, how she whispered something in his ear that made him laugh softly, how he ran his hands through her hair like he had done with me countless times. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a drunken mistake. This was a relationship. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, documenting every detail in my mind. The way she called him baby, how he told her she was beautiful, the careful way they listened for any sound of me returning. They had been planning this. The whole trip, maybe even longer, had been an elaborate setup. And I had been the one to create every opportunity for them, begging Zoe to join us, leaving them alone together, practically pushing them into each other's arms. When I finally managed to move, I walked silently back to my car and sat there, shaking. But instead of the devastation I should have felt, instead of tears or heartbreak, something else was taking over. Cold, calculating rage. I wasn't going to be the pathetic girlfriend who caught her boyfriend cheating and fell apart. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of destroying me. If they wanted to play games, if they thought they could use my trust and kindness against me, then they were about to learn that they had severely underestimated who they were dealing with. I started the car and drove around town for another hour, giving them time to clean up their mess and pretend nothing had happened. When I finally returned to the house, they were both in the living room, fully dressed and sitting on opposite sides of the couch like nothing had changed. How was town? Marcus asked with a smile that now looked completely fake. Perfect, I said, matching his tone exactly. I found the most amazing gift. The rest of that afternoon was like a masterclass in deception, and I was taking careful notes on every lie. When I gave Marcus the lighthouse photograph, he hugged me and said it was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given him. Zoe chimed in about how sweet and caring I was and how Marcus was so lucky to have me. I smiled and played along. But inside, I was cataloging everything. The slight sunburn on Zoe's chest that hadn't been there when I left. The way Marcus's hair was messy in the back like someone had been running their fingers through it. How they both seemed more relaxed and satisfied than they had any right to be. That night at dinner, I started my collection of evidence. While they told me about their relaxing afternoon, I secretly recorded the conversation on my phone, capturing every lie they told about napping separately and reading quietly. Zoe was on the deck the whole time, Marcus said, cutting into his fish. I barely saw her until you got back. It was so peaceful, Zoe added. Just me and my book in the ocean breeze. I nodded and smiled. That sounds perfect. I'm so glad you both got to unwind, but I was already planning my next move. Over the following days, I became a detective in my own relationship. I started taking pictures of everything. Their body language when they thought I wasn't looking, the way they would glance at each other during conversations, how they always seemed to know where the other person was. When we went to the beach, I offered to take pictures of just the two of them for my social media. Come on, you guys finally look like friends, I said cheerfully. Let me get a shot of you both by the water. They hesitated but couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. I took dozens of photos, capturing the way they stood just a little too close, how their hands almost touched, the intimate looks they shared when they thought I was focused on my camera settings. I also started paying attention to their stories. When Marcus said he was going for a morning run, I would casually ask Zoe what her plans were. Inevitably, she would mention needing to take a walk or get some fresh air around the same time. They thought they were being clever with their scheduling, but they were actually creating a perfect timeline of their deception. On our last night, I suggested we all go out for drinks to celebrate our amazing vacation. At the beachside bar, I bought round after round, encouraging them both to drink more than usual. Alcohol makes people careless, and I was counting on that. Sure enough, as the night went on, they became more comfortable with each other. Zoe laughed too loudly at Marcus's jokes. Marcus complimented her dress in a way that was definitely not appropriate. When Zoe went to the bathroom, Marcus watched her walk away with an expression that had nothing to do with friendship. I excused myself and followed her to the restroom, where I heard her on the phone with someone. I know it's complicated, but it feels so right, she was saying. I think I'm falling for him, and I'm pretty sure he feels the same way. When she came out of the stall and saw me, her face went white. Who were you talking to? I asked innocently. My sister, she said quickly. Just family drama. But I had recorded the entire conversation. Back home, I continued building my case. I started paying attention to their social media activity, screenshotting likes and comments that seemed too friendly. I noticed that they were often online at the same times, especially late at night when I was asleep. I also began testing them with small lies to see how they would react. I would tell Marcus that Zoe had said something she hadn't, or tell Zoe that Marcus had plans he didn't actually have. Their responses told me everything I needed to know about how much communication was happening behind my back. The most damning evidence came when I found a receipt in Marcus's jacket for a hotel room in our hometown on a day when he claimed to be working late, and Zoe said she was visiting her family. The dates matched perfectly. By the time I was ready to make my move, I had photos, recordings, receipts, screenshots, and a detailed timeline of their betrayal. I had enough evidence to destroy them both, and I was just getting started. Planning my revenge took 3 weeks of careful preparation, and every detail had to be perfect. I decided that a public humiliation would be the most fitting punishment for two people who had been publicly lying to everyone who cared about them. My birthday was coming up in a month, which gave me the perfect cover story. I started talking excitedly about wanting to have a big celebration for the first time in years. I want to invite everyone, I told Marcus over dinner. All our friends, both families, people from work. I feel like turning 26 should be special. Marcus seemed genuinely happy about the idea. That sounds amazing, babe. You deserve a party. When I mentioned it to Zoe, she was equally enthusiastic. I'll help you plan everything. We can make it the party of the year. The irony of them helping me plan their own destruction was almost too perfect. I rented the community center downtown, the same place where Zoe's parents had held her graduation party and where Marcus's company had their annual holiday celebrations. Everyone would feel comfortable and familiar there, which would make the reveal even more shocking. I told everyone it was going to be a surprise party for me. I asked Marcus to bring me to the venue at 7, claiming I thought we were just going for a quiet dinner. I told all the guests to arrive by 6:30 to surprise me when I walked in, but the real surprise was going to be mine to give. I spent weeks creating a digital presentation disguised as a birthday slideshow, a celebration of friendship and love. I called it when I asked people to send me their favorite photos of us together. The first half was genuinely sweet. Pictures of Marcus and me on dates, photos of Zoe and me from college, group shots from parties and vacations. But then came the second half. I had organized all my evidence chronologically, starting with screenshots of their social media interactions that were too flirty for enemies, moving through photos from our beach trip where they stood too close and ending with the recordings of their lies, the hotel receipt, and finally, a crystal clear photo I had taken of them kissing in Marcus's car outside my apartment building the week before. The final slide was a simple message. Some people mistake kindness for stupidity. Tonight, you learn the difference. I also prepared a speech. I practiced it dozens of times until I could deliver it calmly and confidently without a hint of the rage that was burning inside me. The night of the party, I dressed in the most beautiful dress I owned, a red number that made me look confident and powerful. I wanted everyone to remember how stunning I looked when I destroyed two people's lives. Marcus picked me up exactly on time, complimenting my dress and telling me how excited he was about our intimate dinner. In the car, I almost felt sorry for him. He had no idea what was waiting for him. When we walked into the community center and everyone yelled, "Surprise!" his shock seemed genuine. For a moment, I wondered if I should call the whole thing off. But then I saw Zoe across the room, wearing a dress I had never seen before, looking beautiful and guilty, and completely unaware that her world was about to end. I hugged everyone, accepted birthday wishes, and played the role of surprised and delighted birthday girl for exactly 30 minutes. Then I asked everyone to gather around for the special presentation. I want to share some memories with all the people I love most, I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the room. This past year has taught me so much about friendship, loyalty, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who truly care about you. Marcus and Zoe were standing together near the front, both smiling at me with such fake warmth that I almost laughed. I started the slideshow, and for the first 10 minutes everyone oohed and awed over the sweet photos and heartfelt memories. Marcus squeezed my hand. Zoe wiped away what looked like a genuine tear. Then slide 15 appeared on the screen, a screenshot of Marcus liking Zoe's Instagram photo at 2:47 in the morning with the comment, "Beautiful as always." I heard someone in the crowd whisper, "Wait, what?" The room went completely silent as slide after slide revealed the truth. I watched Marcus's face turn white, then red, then a sickly pale green. Zoe kept shaking her head, like she could make the images disappear through sheer denial. When the audio recording started playing, Zoe's voice clearly saying, "I think I'm falling for him." Her mother gasped audibly from the back of the room. Marcus's boss, who I had specifically invited, looked between him and the screen with obvious disgust. But the moment that made everything worth it was when the final photo appeared, Marcus and Zoe in a passionate embrace outside my apartment building, taken just 5 days earlier. Zoe's father stood up so quickly he knocked over his chair. "Riley," Marcus started, his voice cracking. "I can explain." "No need," I said calmly into the microphone. "I think the evidence speaks for itself." The room erupted in chaos. People were talking over each other, some demanding explanations, others expressing shock and outrage. I heard Zoe's mother saying something about raising her better than this, and Marcus's sister calling him disgusting. Zoe tried to approach me, tears streaming down her face. "Riley, please let me explain. It's not what it looks like. It looks like my best friend and my boyfriend have been lying to my face for months while conducting an affair behind my back," I said, still speaking into the microphone so everyone could hear. "Is that not what it is?" She opened and closed her mouth like a fish, unable to form words. Marcus tried a different approach. "Everyone, please, this is between Riley and us. We don't need to do this publicly." "You mean the way you conducted your relationship publicly while lying to everyone?" I asked. "The way you let me plan this party, invite all these people, while you were sneaking around with my best friend?" "No, Marcus. You chose to make this public the moment you decided to betray every person in this room who cares about me." I clicked to my final slide, my prepared statement, which I read aloud with perfect composure. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate not just my birthday, but the end of my naivety. For months, I watched 2 people I trusted completely lie to my face, manipulate my feelings, and use my kindness as a weapon against me. I invited them into my life, my home, and my relationship because I believed in the goodness of people. Tonight, we all learned that some people don't deserve that trust." The aftermath was swift and devastating. Marcus tried to follow me outside, but my brother Jake physically blocked his path. "You need to leave now," Jake told him. Zoe's family left immediately, her father refusing to even look at her. Several mutual friends approached me to apologize and express their disgust at what they had witnessed. Marcus's boss shook his head and walked out without saying goodbye to him. Within 2 hours, videos of the slideshow were circulating on social media. By the next morning, everyone in our social circle knew exactly what had happened. The photos I had shown were being shared and discussed everywhere. Marcus lost 3 major clients that week when word spread about his character. His company, which prided itself on family values, transferred him to their smallest branch office in a different state. Zoe was asked to leave her book club. Her yoga studio became uncomfortable for her, and several mutual friends blocked her on all social media. But the best part was watching them try to make their relationship work under the weight of their guilt and the public shame. Within a month, they were fighting constantly. Marcus blamed Zoe for seducing him, while she accused him of using her to cheat. The foundation of lies that had brought them together couldn't support an actual relationship. They lasted exactly 6 weeks after my party before Marcus moved away, and Zoe was left alone with her reputation destroyed and no one left to blame but herself. I, on the other hand, had never felt more powerful or free in my entire life. The weeks following my party were like emerging from a fog I hadn't even realized I was living in. Suddenly, people were reaching out to me with stories I had never heard before. I never liked Zoe. My coworker Amanda told me over coffee. She always seemed fake when you brought her to office parties, the way she would compliment your outfit and then roll her eyes when you weren't looking. My college roommate called me from across the country. "Remember when Zoe accidentally told that guy you liked that you were dating someone else? I always suspected she did it on purpose. Even my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, stopped me in the hallway to share her observations. I saw that girl leaving your boyfriend's car several times when you weren't home," she said. "I thought about telling you, but I didn't want to cause trouble if I was wrong." Everyone had seen signs that I had missed or ignored, but instead of feeling embarrassed about my blindness, I felt validated. I wasn't crazy or paranoid. I had been systematically manipulated by 2 people who were experts at deception. The support was overwhelming. Friends I hadn't talked to in years reached out to tell me how proud they were of how I handled the situation. My family was initially shocked by the public nature of my revenge, but my mom eventually admitted it was brilliantly executed. "I raised you to be kind," she said, "but I also raised you to be strong. Sometimes you have to show people that kindness isn't weakness." More importantly, I started recognizing patterns I had never noticed before. How Zoe always had to be the center of attention, even at events that weren't about her. how she would subtly undermine my confidence by making backhanded compliments, how she collected information about everyone's relationships and used it as social currency. I realized that Marcus had probably been chosen specifically because Zoe knew how much he meant to me. It wasn't about love or attraction. It was about power and the thrill of taking something that belonged to someone else. With this new clarity, I began rebuilding my life with intention. I enrolled in a photography class, something I had always wanted to try but never made time for. I started going to the gym, not to look better for anyone else, but because I enjoyed feeling strong. I also became much more selective about who I let into my inner circle. When new people tried to befriend me, I paid attention to how they talked about others, whether they respected boundaries, and if their actions matched their words. The most surprising change was how attractive confidence made me to other people. Men approached me more often, but more importantly, the quality of people I attracted improved dramatically. I was no longer drawing in users and manipulators because I was no longer broadcasting vulnerability and naive trust. 3 months after the party, I met David at my photography class. He was quiet, genuine, and had no idea about my recent drama until I chose to tell him weeks later. When I finally shared the story, his response was perfect. Good for you. People like that count on their victims staying silent. I never heard from Marcus again after he moved away, but Zoe tried several times to reconnect. She sent long emails apologizing and explaining how confused she had been. She claimed she had been going through a difficult time and made terrible choices. She even suggested we could work through it and rebuild our friendship. I deleted every message without responding. She had shown me exactly who she was, and I believed her the first time. 6 months after my birthday party, I barely recognized the person I had become, and I loved every inch of her. The naive girl who used to bend over backward trying to make everyone happy was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to protect it. I had thrown myself into every aspect of self-improvement with the same strategic thinking I had used for my revenge. I joined a professional development group at work and started speaking up in meetings instead of staying quietly in the background. My boss noticed immediately and offered me a promotion that came with a significant salary increase. With my new income, I moved out of the apartment where so many betrayals had taken place and found a beautiful one-bedroom downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. Decorating it became an act of self-love. Every piece was chosen because I loved it, not because it might impress someone else. My relationship with David was growing stronger every day, built on a foundation of honesty that I had never experienced before. He knew about my past, respected my boundaries, and never made me feel like I needed to apologize for being cautious. When I told him I wanted to take things slowly, he said, "I'm not going anywhere. We have all the time in the world." But the most satisfying change was how I handled new people who tried to enter my life with questionable intentions. My experience with Zoe had given me a sixth sense for manipulation, and I wasn't afraid to use it. When a new coworker started asking suspiciously detailed questions about my relationship with David, I shut it down immediately. "That's pretty personal," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I prefer to keep my private life private." When an old acquaintance from college reached out on social media claiming she wanted to reconnect but immediately started fishing for information about my income and living situation, I politely declined her invitation to meet up. I had learned that protecting yourself isn't mean or paranoid. It's necessary and smart. The best part was discovering talents and interests I had never explored because I had been so focused on managing other people's emotions. Photography turned out to be a genuine passion, and my instructor encouraged me to enter a local competition. When I won second place, the confidence boost was incredible. I also started writing in a journal, documenting not just my daily life but also my observations about people and relationships. The clarity that came from putting my thoughts on paper was addictive, and I began to understand myself in ways I never had before. My social circle had naturally evolved to include people who appreciated authenticity and directness. These new friends respected my boundaries, celebrated my successes without jealousy, and never made me feel like I needed to dim my light to make them comfortable. When David asked me to move in with him after 8 months of dating, I said yes without hesitation, but I also kept my apartment for another 6 months, just to be sure. Trust, I had learned, should be earned slowly and proven consistently. The old me would have been embarrassed by my caution, worried about seeming paranoid or damaged. The new me understood that healthy skepticism was a form of self-respect, and anyone who had a problem with my boundaries wasn't someone I needed in my life anyway. 1 year after my party, I was having lunch with my sister when she casually mentioned running into Zoe at the grocery store. "She looked terrible," Emma said, picking at her salad. "Like she hadn't slept in weeks. She asked about you, actually." "What did you tell her?" I asked, genuinely curious but not concerned. "That you were doing amazing, which you are," Emma smiled. She got this look on her face like she was going to cry right there in the produce section. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no pity, no anger, just complete indifference, which was somehow more powerful than any emotion I could have felt. Later that week, I learned from mutual friends that Zoe and Marcus had indeed imploded exactly as I had predicted. Their relationship, built on lies and stolen moments, couldn't survive the reality of being together openly. Marcus had moved to Portland for work, and they had broken up via text message after a series of increasingly ugly fights. She kept accusing him of looking at other women, my friend Kate told me, and he told people she was clingy and paranoid. Apparently, once the excitement of sneaking around was gone, they realized they didn't actually like each other very much. Marcus, according to his former co-workers, was struggling professionally. Word of his character had followed him to his new job, and he was having trouble building trust with clients. His social media showed a series of failed attempts at dating, with women who seemed to lose interest quickly. Zoe had it worse. She had stayed in town, but her reputation never recovered. The story of my birthday party had become legendary in our social circle, shared as a cautionary tale about karma and justice. She had tried to reinvent herself several times, joining new gyms, changing her hair, even attempting to start fresh in different social groups. But the internet is forever, and people talked. I heard she had been seeing a therapist, which I actually hoped was true, not because I felt sorry for her, but because I believed everyone deserved the chance to become a better person, even if it was too late to undo the damage they had caused. Marcus's sister, who I had always liked, reached out to me through social media. "I want you to know that our whole family was disgusted by what Marcus did," she wrote. "My parents stopped speaking to him for months, and he's been basically exiled from family gatherings. What you did at that party was brave, and I'm glad someone finally held him accountable for his actions." She also told me that Marcus had tried to reach out to me several times through mutual friends, claiming he wanted to apologize and make things right. She had told him to leave me alone. "Some things can't be fixed with an apology," she said. "He made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences." But the best part of my new life wasn't their downfall. It was my own rise. David and I had been living together for 6 months, and our relationship was everything I had never known I deserved. He was supportive without being controlling, loving without being possessive, and honest without being cruel. When I told him about my photography competition win, he surprised me with a professional camera and a weekend trip to the mountains to practice landscape photography. When I mentioned wanting to take a creative writing class, he helped me research programs and encouraged me to pursue it. "You light up when you talk about your passions," he told me. "I love seeing you excited about life." I had also started mentoring younger women at work, sharing what I had learned about recognizing, manipulation, and trusting their instincts. Several of them had thanked me for helping them navigate difficult situations with friends and romantic partners. My revenge had been perfect, but my recovery was even better. So, here we are 2 years later, and I need to tell you exactly how everyone in this story ended up because I think it matters. I think other women need to hear this. Marcus never recovered professionally or personally. He's still in Portland working for a small marketing firm that doesn't know his history, but he's never regained the confidence he once had. His dating life is a series of short-term relationships that end when women sense something off about him. He developed a reputation for being paranoid and jealous, constantly worried that he's being betrayed the way he betrayed others. Karma, it turns out, has a perfect sense of irony. Last I heard, he was in therapy for trust issues. The man who destroyed trust is now incapable of trusting anyone else. Zoe's story is more complex but equally satisfying. She eventually left town, moving back in with her parents in another state. The social isolation broke her in ways I don't think she expected. She lost not just me and Marcus, but the entire social network she had spent years building. Her Instagram, once full of group photos and social events, became a sad collection of selfies and inspirational quotes about starting over. She tried to rebrand herself as a wellness influencer, posting about healing and growth, but everyone who knew her real story could see through the performance. She currently works at her father's insurance office and lives alone in a studio apartment. The last time someone mentioned her to me, they said she seemed smaller somehow, like she had lost something essential about herself. My family thrived. My parents, who had always worried I was too trusting, were proud of how I handled the situation. My brother Jake became fiercely protective and started paying closer attention to the people his own girlfriend brought around. My sister Emma used my story as a teaching moment with her teenage daughter about choosing friends wisely. David and I got engaged last month. When he proposed, he said something that showed me he truly understood who I had become. "I fell in love with your strength first, your kindness second. I know you can take care of yourself, which makes me want to take care of you even more. We're planning a small wedding with only people who have proven themselves trustworthy over time. But most importantly, I need to tell you about the woman I became. I'm not the same person who started this story, desperately trying to force harmony between people who were actively working against me. I'm someone who trusts her instincts, protects her energy, and refuses to be anyone's victim. I'm someone who understands that real friendship and love don't require you to diminish yourself or ignore red flags. Women, listen to me carefully. I was the girl who believed that being kind meant being naive, that trusting people completely was virtuous, that giving everyone the benefit of the doubt made me a good person. I learned the hard way that some people view kindness as weakness and trust as opportunity. They study your patterns, exploit your loyalty, and use your own love against you. The signs are always there when someone consistently criticizes the people you love while positioning themselves as your protector. When they ask too many detailed questions about your relationships, when they know things they shouldn't know, when your gut tells you something is wrong, even if you can't explain why. Trust that feeling. And if you discover you've been betrayed, don't just be a victim, be strategic, document everything, plan carefully, make sure the consequences match the crime. Not because revenge is always the answer, but because some people only learn when they face real accountability for their actions. The most important thing I learned is that protecting yourself isn't mean or suspicious. It's necessary. The right people will respect your boundaries and earn your trust slowly. The wrong people will complain that you're being difficult or paranoid. That's how you know the difference. I'm not sorry for what I did to Marcus and Zoe. They made calculated decisions to hurt me, and they faced calculated consequences. The only thing I regret is not trusting myself sooner, not seeing the signs that were right in front of me. But that girl who ignored red flags and made excuses for people who didn't deserve them, she served her purpose. She taught me exactly who I never want to be again, and sometimes that's the most valuable lesson of all.